Tatarin sat in the small walled-off garden outside Lacine's palace, waiting. He had spent the last day avoiding her like the wilt, but he couldn't ignore a direct summons from her. They had briefly discussed the Herald's plan to aid Crom by killing Brokken, but Tatarin still found the entire notion insane, and he didn't fully understand the actual process of carrying out that plan. Such details were still being fleshed out. He closed his eyes and breathed in deeply, reaching out with his senses, smelling the flowers, hearing the bugs buzz around and the birds sing, feeling the warm sun against his skin. Lacine kept a large stock of cattle for the sanguines to feed on. She allowed him to have his fill as well. They were a much better source of power and soul than the miserable wretches the butcher had offered. It felt like ages since he had held this much strength, this much power. He felt alive. His senses reached out far and wide. He heard the patter of feet from the market several levels below. He smelled the scent of the bakery 2 blocks away. He felt the wind from over the mountain and the breeze from the sea. He saw 2 burning red eyes of inscrutable hatred burrowing into his soul. He started back, releasing his senses and gasping for breath. When he opened his eyes, he saw Lacine standing in front of him. How had he not sensed her before? She made no noise, released no scent, disturbed no air with her movement. She smiled and moved to sit down on the bench next to him. Now that he saw her, her scent filled his nose. She wore a deep green velvet dress that was much less revealing than what she wore the first time they met, yet it still clung tightly to her form and left little to the imagination.
"Have you come to try to seduce me again?"
he stuttered.
"No, I've come to apologize."
She crossed her legs and leaned towards him. The look of a predator on the prowl was nowhere to be seen on her beautiful pale face.
"I'm sorry,"
she said with slightly upturned lips. She righted herself and leaned back in a casual pose.
"I'm so used to forcing my will upon people to get what I want, that I often forget that there are some whose own will doesn't require my force."
She pondered for a moment, while Tatarin found himself speechless.
"It's rare, you know, to meet someone whose strength and power rival mine."
"What of the Herald?"
he finally said. She scoffed.
"The Herald is old, older than me, which is even more rare, but he grows weak. We children of blood need our strength as our god demands. I respect him greatly, but I do not see him as an equal, instead as a symbol of a bygone era."
She looked towards him again with intent.
"What do you think of his plan?"
"His plan to kill a god? If I didn't know him better, I would have thought he was joking."
"His plan could actually work. It will be difficult, but we are presented with a rare opportunity. Crom is a god of chaos, Brokken a god of order. While one exists, the other is weakened. They are connected. Killing one will free the other to fully realize their power once more. When Crom returns in full, I will be rewarded. The Herald will most likely be punished for taking so long, but he'll survive. You, however, he will kill."
The words sank deep into Tatarin. He knew that was the only outcome for him. Regardless of their plan, he had made a blood oath to offer himself to Crom. Only the death of the Herald could break that, but hearing it spoken out loud still shook him.
"After all your work, with all your power, you'll be nothing more than a meal to him."
She let her words hang in the air, drifting away on the wind.
"Well, we have preparations to be about, but let's continue this conversation later. All right?"
she said, while rising from the bench with exacting grace.
"Tonight, we celebrate, we drink, we feed, we feast. Then we shall meet by the gate. We need to make sure that damned thing will do what the Herald wants it to, when the time comes."
And so they did. They celebrated with wine and blood. Dozens of sanguines feasting on poor creatures who didn't know what they were getting into. Only one of them died this night. Tatarin found it all repulsive in a way that didn't quite make sense to him. He hated Brokken nobility for their indifference towards the lives they ruined, for their excess and drunkenness while their people suffered. But these sanguines, how much worse were they? They weren't taking blood just to gain strength like he did. They weren't feeding just to survive. They were feasting, rejoicing in the agony they caused. Crom was a god of chaos, not cruelty, change, not carnage. Were these savages really of his blood? Was this what Crom really stood for? Was Tatarin really any better than they were? He met the Herald and Lady Lacine by the cordoned-off Hengegate late into the night, after many of her guests had left. He arrived with a heavy heart and a queasy stomach, two things he thought he had long since seen the last of. He felt as though his entire life had been one forced event after another, events that he had no agency over. Every choice he should have had was ripped from him. The only choice he had made for himself was to leave the brood, but look how that turned out. Fate was a cruel mistress. He simply wished she would leave him alone for a time. The plan was fairly straightforward. Well, as straightforward as killing a god ever was. They were to journey into the Vale through the Hengegate, find a weak spot in the barrier between the Otherworld, which the Herald assured them was there, then use their combined strength to break through. Then they would locate Crom. The Herald believed that wherever Crom was, Brokken and his steel abomination would not be far behind. The current struggle was actually getting to the Vale. The Queen's top researchers had been working tirelessly trying to get the gate to function properly. But that technology was ancient, and few ever knew how to operate them normally. Fewer still could access their full potential, as was evidenced. Tatarin found it odd that Crom himself couldn't just open a rift and bring them to the Otherworld himself. But the Herald claimed he was too weak, even for that. Myth claimed not all gods could walk the mortal world, but Crom most certainly had in the past. Could Brokken's Apotheosis really have weakened him so much?
Have you broken into the Vale itself yet?
The Herald asked, as he and Lacine walked between the standing stones.
Not yet. We know it's possible,
She said with clear agitation.
Every time we open a gate, you can glimpse the Vale, if only for a moment. So why can we not simply stop there?
What if you timed it precisely?
Tatarin cut in from where he stood outside the circle of stones. Lacine turned to look at him.
We've thought of that, but who knows where you would end up. The Vale has been known to be unpredictable, even in the most predictable setting.
Herald, you can't simply send us there like you do with souls, can you?
Regrettably, no. I can transfer energy, but little else, I'm afraid.
Ask the forebears.
A soft voice cut through the rustling leaves and wind around them. A voice that burrowed directly into Tatarin's mind. Evidently, the others experienced the same, as they all turned around in unison towards a newcomer in the courtyard. His brain took a moment to catch up to what his eyes were seeing. They first went to the strange apparatus that hovered a few paces away. It was like a bowl of wood and brass, several feet wide, with numerous cogs and crystals jutting from it in odd angles. Magical machines and artifice that he couldn't even begin to understand. A narrow brass arm with 4 joints bending backwards like the single leg of a spider descended from the bottom of the large device. It gently brushed and tapped the ground, as if checking to see that the device was still floating. His eyes then continued upward to the small creature that sat in the strange contraption, the small creature that had spoken into his mind. Their thin form was beyond frail, like a starved and desiccated child, a sight he had seen several times in his unfortunate life, some of which he had caused. This one, however, was not a child, a fact that he could tell from the 2 spikes of antler that pierced the top of their head. This was an Ayrden, the rarest of all the races, as they weren't really a race at all. A human descendant of Elken blood, a defect, an anomaly. human-born but uncommonly small, and with pointed ears, large Elken eyes, and the ability to grow horns as they aged, though not as impressive as the full racks of antlers Elken could grow. Tatarin had never seen one personally. Entire generations of humans would come and go without ever seeing one. So few human bloodlines contained Elken blood these days that their existence was a near impossibility. Yet, here one stood. Or rather, hovered. Stories claimed that many Iredin would never learn to walk, as their frail legs could often not hold their weight, even at a young age. They rarely grew over 4 feet tall, and never lived more than 40 years. But they were always born with impossibly large souls. Souls strong enough to invade another person's mind and inject words directly to them without the need for any kind of alignment or spell. It was said that Brokken had assembled a large workforce of them to utilize their brilliant minds and massive souls to create all types of devices for his empire. Tatarin reached out with his soul, gently prodding at the creature. He was met with a virtual feast of spiritual energy, ripe for the taking. He had to hold himself back from striking down the being and taking his fill.
I wouldn't try that, Tatarin dear. I apologize. I should have warned you. Meeting an Iredin for the first time with gifts like ours can be testing.
I'm flattered.
The Iredin forced into his mind. It rolled its head to face Tatarin, though its eyes stared blankly past him.
Though you will find that my blood is laced with the dust of a veil shard, that I have bound to a rather angry Faeden test subject. I hear it is a cocktail quite repulsive to your kind.
He honestly couldn't tell the gender of the creature. Its face looked so young, and its head was smooth with no hair. The voice it projected into Tatarin's mind sounded the way his own would, though he assumed each person would hear it differently.
This is Professor Welox. He was a coronation gift for the Ministry of Intelligence. I have put him to good use in uncovering the secrets of our Hengegate. He is aware of our affiliations and conditions.
A pleasure.
The professor said again in his mind.
Can you not speak? The mind thing is a bit distracting.
The Iredin struggled to open his mouth, but all that came out was a faint wheezing sound.
Alas, my vocal cords and the muscles of my throat are no longer strong enough for speech. My affliction is more severe than many of my kind, so I ask that you forgive the distraction.
What was that you said earlier?
The herald began.
About the forebearers.
The forebearers, the Elken, they may have forgotten much of their heritage and the true ways of the Woden, but they know the Hengegates well.
I very much doubt an Elken gatekeeper would be eager to share their secrets.
Lacine added.
Perhaps not, but my experiments have not gotten us very far. Activating the Hengegates requires specific flows of magical energy in specific intervals and locations. Your gatekeepers know incantations that can facilitate this ritual, but no incantation is known for what you request. And without fully understanding the underlying systems that lend function to the device, I'm afraid I'm at a loss.
I trust you have studied these specifics while the gate was in operation.
Indeed, though my readings were confusing at best, confounding at worst, I need a method of creating consistent flow which I can measure.
The professor's mouth twitched downwards in a frown.
Harold,
Lacine spoke after pondering for a moment.
Yes, my lady?
do you think you would be able to stabilize a flow of spiritual energy the way the good professor has described?
If that spiritual energy was in the form of blood, perhaps. But even still, my control over the hemomantic arts, much like your own, are limited.
The herald trailed off, grasping what she was about to ask.
What about the boy?
She asked, turning to look at Tatarin. He warily glanced towards the herald. A look of concern and wariness stretched his aged face. Then he looked back to Lacine, then finally to the professor.
He is of the fourth aspect, yes?
Welox asked.
He is.
The herald said cautiously.
If the ritual could be performed with blood, then he may be able to do what you require. But trying to perform such an ancient ritual with an entirely different discipline of magic and with a different medium could have unpredictable results.
He continued to the others. Tatarin had the distinct impression that they were looking at him as a tool, a means to an end, and not as another person standing right next to them. Though various other theories and suggestions were made, the night proved rather uneventful, with little to no real progress being made towards their ultimate goal. Tatarin felt lost. Not the same kind of lost that he had felt in his youth, with no meaning or purpose, but a new kind of lost. Like he was lost in a vast sea, with no control over what was happening to him one way or the other. And yet, this was his destiny, wasn't it? His destiny seemed to have always been intertwined with uncertainty, yet he couldn't help but feel that it was wrong for him to want more. He awoke the next morning, after very little sleep, to a messenger from Lacine, asking to once again meet him in the gardens. He was uncharacteristically anxious as he walked through the narrow halls of the palace. Despite Lacine's appearance and her seemingly honest apology the day before, she still unnerved him greatly. She was one of the few people who could honestly relate to him in many ways, not just in his extraordinary power, but also in their forced servitude to Crom. He forced himself to be cautious of any relatability or empathy he felt from the Queen. He still didn't know how much of that was sincere, as opposed to simple political positioning on her part. He needed to remember that not only was she very politically savvy, but also that she predated the Brokken Empire itself by at least centuries. Any relatability was simply an illusion, much like her enchantment over him when they first met. He sighed as he walked. He wasn't cut out for politics. Clean Vastran air was a warm welcome as he exited the palace into the wide garden. Lacine was already waiting for him, dressed in a vibrant violet gown, a shade that made him think of the way Morai, the Woden goddess of fate, was often depicted. In fact, even the way she lounged on the bench, so beautiful and elegant, reminded Tatarin of a statue he had once seen of the deity. She hadn't noticed Tatarin approaching yet, or more likely she hadn't expressed her notice of him. She was staring up towards the Vastran mountains, as if longing. What an immortal sanguine queen like her could long for, Tatarin couldn't even begin to imagine.
I'm not originally from Vastran, you know,
the queen said in a soft voice, not turning her gaze from the mountains.
I grew up in a small village, far to the west of here.
Tatarin quietly moved to sit down beside her.
Even though you were of Vastran nobility?
He asked. She laughed.
Tatarin, dear, I had lived several lifetimes before this kingdom was even formed. My claim to this throne is more tenuous than I would like to admit. No, my origins were much humbler.
She paused, letting her chest rise and fall with deep breaths of mountain air.
I sometimes miss it. This simple life. The life of a gal whose wildest dreams were of getting married to some farm boy and having children.
A fond smile formed upon her beautiful lips. Tatarin had to forcibly tear his eyes away from staring at them.
Such lives are not meant for us, I'm afraid. Crom always has other plans, whether we like it or not.
Do you?
Do I what?
Like it.
Lacine chuckled.
I'm a queen. It's hard not to like it a little.
She teased. Her playful smile faded to a much darker expression.
Crom took everything from me. He slaughtered my entire village, my family. He did terrible things to me, both before and after his gift. A gift given to so very few. It's hard to say that the price I paid was worth it. But I've lived hundreds of lives, and done incredible things.
In his name.
Tatarin interjected bitterly.
Always in his name. That is the one thing I envy about the Brood. They follow Crom out of fear, or respect, or reverence. Sanguines, we don't have a choice. Sanguinism changes you. It's not that we don't have free will, but that our will is now intrinsically bound to his. Some have attempted to rebel in the past, but if he appeared before us now and asked me to plunge a dagger into my own heart, I would do it without hesitation. And I would want to. It's like the enchantment I used when we first met. But instead of simply increasing one's desire to obey, it is a demand.
She turned to look at him fondly.
I'm sorry. This isn't why I asked you to meet with me.
She turned her body even more towards Tatarin, displaying the intricate lacework atop the bust of her gown.
Last night, we spoke of you acting as a catalyst for the Hengegate's power.
And the Herald said that meddling with a ritual like that could be dangerous.
She sighed.
Yes, he did. And he is right. What if there was another way? Changing the source of the ritual's power to blood could be catastrophic. But if we didn't have to...
Then you wouldn't need me.
Oh, but we do.
She said, scooting closer like a young, energetic girl, eager to share the town's latest gossip.
Someone with your power is very rare. It's been so long since a true fourth aspect Hemomancer has graced the mortal world, and far longer since Crom has let one survive. Do you know why he fears people like you?
The question caught him off guard.
He doesn't fear me. He's simply greedy for my power. Isn't he?
His certainty wavered as he asked the last question.
In part, yes. But even as powerful as you are, your soul would be little more than a drop in the sea if he were to consume it. He fears what you are capable of. Hemomancy is more than just the magic of blood. It is the magic of life, of change, of magic itself. I have long theorized about the furthest potential of hemomancy, but I have been unable to fully practice these theories due to the limitations of my own hemomantic ability.
Tatarin's mind was reeling, trying to grasp what she was insinuating.
What exactly are you suggesting?
I believe there is a fifth aspect of hemomancy.
The world fell silent to Tatarin's ears. The birds no longer called. The wind no longer blew. The sea no longer swelled. Time itself halted at her words. A fifth aspect. Without her even needing to explain the implications, Tatarin understood. Not just mortal blood. The blood of the very world itself. Control over all forms of spiritual energies. The ability to control the very flow of life and magic itself. Such power would make one a god. A god like Crom. Lacine flicked her eyes to look past Tatarin.
Play along, will you, dear?
She whispered in his ear while moving to stand. Tatarin turned around to face the direction she was looking, and his blood stilled. On the far side of the garden stood a hard-featured man with a long, dark coat. Two blazing red eyes flashed in Tatarin's mind, hateful and oppressive. It was him, Martonus and his demon. Tatarin wanted to run. He wanted to scream. His heart pounded and he fought for breath. He felt rooted in place by some malevolent force. He slowly began to inch himself along the bench in the opposite direction. Lacine glanced back towards him and weighed him in curious eyes. How was she so calm? He had warned them. He told them that Martonus was following him. Did she not know who he was?
Tatarin,
She said under her breath.
it's not what you think.
He fought against his rebellious heart, his blood, forcing them to cool, and his breath to calm. He looked at the man approaching, that terrible, evil, monstrous. His eyes finally moved past the man's dark clothes and familiar silhouette and focused on his face. Despite his graying hair and hard features, his face looked far younger than Martonus. It wasn't Martonus at all. It was a different Ministry Keeper.
Valtorus, my dear.
Lacine said, with a bright smile and arms out in welcome.
Allow me to introduce my cousin, Rieton.
She motioned to where Tatarin sat. This Valtorus stopped in place and met Tatarin's eyes, then nodded to him briefly with a grunt before continuing past them into the palace. Lacine turned back to Tatarin.
I'm sorry. I should have warned you. The Ministry has sent Valtorus to hunt your little deranged friend. Apparently, he's gone rogue.
He still struggled to control his breathing as he replied.
You're allowing a keeper with one of those creatures in his head to just walk around freely. What if he recognizes me? Or the Herald, or figures out what you are?
She patted his shoulder with a fond gesture.
He's not here for you, or the Herald, or me. He's here for this Martonus, and nothing else. He will not interfere with our work.
Her hand slid off his shoulder, down to her side.
There are many matters I must see to, but I hope to see you again tonight.
She turned and followed the path that Valtorus had carved, then entered the palace. Tatarin thought much about what Lacine had said during the whole rest of the day. A fifth aspect of Hemomancy. It infected his mind like a plague. It had him in a death grip. It was the teeth of a steel trap lodged around his throat, making it hard to breathe, to think. His soul subconsciously reached out, probing for a power he didn't even want, much like it had many years ago. It was the power to change things. Anything. The power to remake the brood in his own image. A power to rival Crom himself. To become Crom himself, a rebellious thought whispered in his mind. Did he want that? To become a god? He didn't think he did. But he could do so much good. He could provide and care for his people in a way Crom never had. His fate would finally be his own. Such treasonous thoughts haunted him all day, right up until nearly midnight when he approached the Hengegate. He heard the revelrous sounds of the night's festivities still lingering through the halls and echoing in the courtyard that held the gate. The others had yet to arrive. Tatarin walked around the imposing ring of standing stones, running his fingers across the rough surfaces. He entered the ring, approaching the large stone in the center, and placed his hand onto it. It was cold. He could see faint veins and geodes of different materials throughout the gray stone. Further up was a series of ancient woden ogham, dozens of vertical and horizontal lines with dashes and dots sprouting off from them, chiseled into the stone. Tatarin had no idea what they read. Very few people, if any, did. Some people said that the writing was actually musical notation instead of a usable lexicon. Either way would be equally impossible for Tatarin to decipher. He closed his eyes and let his fingers trace the odd writing, and then the natural flow of rock. He reached out with more than his hand. He forced his blood against the confines of his mortal shell. His senses heightened. Every ridge of stone became a fathomless canyon, every etched rune a chasm of unknowable knowledge. His ears rang in frequency with an otherworldly sound bleeding into the mortal world. His breath blew out like a strong wind from the western mountains. The hairs on the back of his hand stood on end as the breeze blew across.
Marvelous, aren't they?
A voice cut quietly but forcefully through Tatarin's concentration and straight into his mind. He released his blood, allowing it to flow back into its natural state, his senses fading. He turned to see Professor Welox entering the courtyard on his strange apparatus.
They have fascinated me my entire life.
Tatarin slowly backed away from the stones.
I'm sorry, I didn't do anything. I was just...
You have no need to apologize, but do tell me, what did you feel?
What do you mean?
You were trying to interface with them, weren't you? The stones. Tell me what you felt.
Tatarin turned his head back to the stones while Welox's hovering chair approached beside him. Its singular appendage tapped the ground lightly as it moved.
Nothing much. I heard something. Like the dull music of a tavern a block away. Or a hushed whisper from under a door.
Ah, you're a poet now. How interesting.
I didn't mean it like that. It was just hard to explain.
No, I understand. I think I can hear it too sometimes. A forgotten song that hasn't been sung in eons still lingers in these pillars.
Welox's chair began a slow circle around the central pillar.
The Queen shared her theory with me. She believes you may be able to channel energy through these stones in a way no other mage could.
She believes more than that.
She does. She asked me to help you, if you'll let me.
Tatarin took a step back at this.
I actually have a choice? And what do you know about hemomancy?
You do have a choice. She may be used to bending people's will to her own, but I prefer more humane methods in my research. As for hemomancy, I know very little, other than what Her Majesty has elected to inform me. Though I have studied the nature of magic, souls, and spirit since before I could walk.
Tatarin's eyes fell through sludge to Welox's device, then climbed back up to his emotionless face.
That was a joke.
Right. The blood arts don't disturb you?
No more than any other form of magic. Why? Do they disturb you?
A little, I suppose. I'm so used to outsiders hating and reviling us.
Do not misunderstand me. Sanguinism is a terrible curse, and some of the rituals and practices of your people are cruel. But magic is magic. I seek to learn all I can of it. I am no Brokken fundamentalist. I am a realist.
Welox's eyes slowly closed, then opened, and his fingers twitched.
Now try again to focus on that sound, that melody. Let it flow through you. Do more than hear it. Feel it. Follow the sound. Join it. Mold it.
As he spoke, two other people entered the courtyard. One was a middle-aged woman, the other a younger man. Both wore intricate and vibrant green robes, marking them as gatekeepers. They gave Tatarin disdainful looks, as if he was a child meddling in things he shouldn't. In reality, he was just that. They took up positions on either side of the central pillar and started chanting a strange and melodic incantation. Welox's head dipped slightly in a nod towards Tatarin. There was a stirring in the air, a feeling of blood and magic. He could sense Welox's blood come alive with an immense strength that he seemed to offer Tatarin, not as blood, but as power. He took a deep breath, then closed his eyes. He felt with his ears, with his mind, with his blood. His soul expanded outwards, passing over the stones. He tasted the petty souls of the two gatekeepers and the wellspring of energy that was Welox. The incantations the gatekeepers used were merely a pale imitation of what lay beyond, which he could just barely make out. He felt his soul merge with the stones. Stone had no blood, but it did have life. The stones themselves seemed to shake and vibrate along with the unheard song. A discordant melody, chaotic and beautiful. It sounded so wrong based on what very little he knew about music, but it felt so right. The music was like a fog, swirling and changing around them, amorphous. He basked in it. His blood leapt and rejoiced in the unholy music. As the incantation continued, the fog started to take shape. It formed into dense rings of sound, mingling between the stones, harmonies upon harmonies. It sounded right, but it felt forced. The sound wanted to run wild. Life wanted to be free, to change. He sensed an impression of a place as the sound rose to a crescendo in his mind. Pyrrhica. They were opening a gate to Pyrrhica. He didn't know how he knew that, but he did. It was such a shame to confine power like this to a simple location. It wanted so much more. His will joined with the stone, the song, and his soul merged with the power that Welox gave. That poor excuse for a song that the gatekeepers offered sounded like nails on slate. A chill of discomfort ran through his body at their screeching. Who were they to command such power? Who were they to restrain it? With an impulse, he silenced them. He faintly heard their corpses hit the stone floor in rhythm. Finally, the power was free. The power was his. He steered it like a conductor at a symphony, not against its will. All power had a will. No, he steered it along its own nature, a nature of chaos and life, a nature of change.
Find the veil. Follow the origin.
An impression struggled to whisper into his mind. He almost silenced that sound too. But no. Welox was trying to help him. He couldn't take Welox's blood, and he couldn't control the power without his aid. He listened to the voice, following the music. The orderly rings of sound expanded back into fog, then grew into a cloud. His eyes were still closed, but he could see streaks of lightning explode from that cloud, violet and crimson. Their thunderous sound struck with the beat. The chaos filled his heart, his mind, his very being. Then with a loud crack, all fell silent. An eternity passed in that silence. 10 breaths that could have been 10,000. He opened his eyes. The standing stone in the center of the ring glowed with a terrible light, but no light truly shone off of it. 2 bodies lay on either side of the pillar, fully desiccated and drained of blood. Welox's contraption lay in a mangled heap a few paces away, his frail body still strapped into it. Tatarin worried for a moment that he was dead, but he could still feel his blood pulsing throughout his small body.
Look behind,
Welox's voice said. Despite it being in Tatarin's own mind, it sounded exhausted. He slowly turned around. Behind him was one of the larger stone gateways, 2 massive pillars with a large slab across the top. Between the pillars was an infinite expanse of clouded darkness, stricken through with bright flashes of pale purple and red lightning. He had done it. He had opened a gateway into the veil.